All right, ready to decode smart contracts today. We're diving deep into Chapter 5 of Deep Dive into Smart Contracts.
Very on brand, I see.
Well, we got to lean into the theme, right?
I like it. So we're going for that aha moment, getting everyone to really understand smart contracts, but without getting lost in the technical weeds.
Exactly. Like, enough to impress your friends at a dinner party, but without needing a computer science degree.
And that's a goal I can get behind. And to kick things off, how about we start with something relatable, like vending machines?
Vending machines.
Yeah, not exactly the first thing that comes to mind with smart contracts, right?
Not quite the high-tech image I had, no.
But that's the beauty of it, right? It's a perfect real-world analogy. Think about it. You put in your money, you make your selection, and boom, snap attack. No need to negotiate with a cashier or worry if the machine's going to rip you off.
You just trust that it'll work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because it's all pre-programmed, just like a smart contract. So you could say that vending machines are kind of like the OG smart contracts.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection. So are we saying the key here is removing trust between parties? Like, with the vending machine, you're not putting your trust in a person. You're trusting the machine and the person who stocked it, hopefully.
Exactly. You trust the machine to deliver because the code says it has to. And that's what makes smart contracts so powerful. They automate trust and cut out the middleman.
Instead of dispensing snacks, we're talking about managing digital assets, agreements.
Even real-world goods and services.
Yeah.
The possibilities are pretty much endless.
Okay, so now I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let's take it back to the basics for a sec. How about we start with the formal definition of a smart contract?
Let's do it. Lay it on me.
Okay, so our source defines a smart contract as a set of promises specified in digital form, including protocols within which the parties perform on these promises. Kind of a mouthful.
I'll say, it sounds complicated, but it's actually pretty straightforward once you break it down.
All right, let's break it down then. What do we got? Promises, those are basically the conditions of the agreement, right?
Right. Then we've got digital form, which just means these promises are written in code.
And protocols are basically the ground rules, how the contract is executed, when, by who, and all that.
And that bit about within which the parties perform, that's the key to the whole thing. It means this all happens automatically. No middlemen, no need to chase anyone down to fulfill their end of the bargain.
It's like setting up a chain reaction. Once the conditions are met, boom, the contract self-executes.
You got it. But just like you wouldn't want to set off a chain reaction with a bunch of duds, you have to be incredibly careful with the code in a smart contract.
Because once it's out there, right?
Exactly. Once it's deployed on the blockchain, it's very difficult to change. So it's less about the contract being smart and more about it being automated.
Like my coffee maker. It makes a mean espresso, but ask it to whip up a smoothie, and, well, good luck with that.
Exactly. Smart contracts, they excel at what they're programmed to do, but they lack that human flexibility. And that's where understanding the different models and nuances of smart contract design is so important. It's not just about churning out lines of code,
Okay, so there's more to it than just the code itself. What else is there?
Well, for one thing, there's a whole spectrum of design approaches when it comes to smart contracts, each with its own strengths and limitations.
Okay, so it's not all just like lines of code. What else is there? What does that spectrum look like?
It's more about the underlying structure,
Yeah.
and how much human intervention is involved.
Okay, so walk me through it. What are we talking here?
Think of it like building a house, right?
Okay.
You can use different materials, wood, brick, concrete, whatever, but the principles of architecture still apply. Similarly, some smart contracts are heavily code-driven, written in languages like Solidity, which is tailor-made for the Ethereum blockchain.
Solidity. That name rings a bell. That's like related to JavaScript, right?
You got it.
Right.
And the platform it runs on, it's like the operating system of the Ethereum blockchain where these contracts actually live. It's called the Ethereum virtual machine, or EVM for short.
The EVM, right? Got it.
Yeah. So Solidity gives developers a lot of control on the EVM. But the downside is, like we talked about before, that also means things can go wrong,
Right, because once it's launched.
You're locked in.
Exactly. That's a scary thought, which is where auditing comes in, right?
100%. Even a tiny error can snowball into a major issue. Imagine if the Y2K bug happened today, but instead of messing with calendars, it's like financial agreements built on smart contracts.
Oh, man. Okay, now that's a scary thought.
Right.
Gives me flashbacks to stocking up on canned goods and bottled water.
Totally. And that's what auditing helps us avoid, right? Auditors, they examine the code meticulously, looking for vulnerabilities, loopholes, anything that could be exploited.
So they're like code detectives, making sure everything is like airtight.
Exactly. But it's not all about security either. They also look for ways to make the code more efficient because, fun fact, inefficient code can actually be expensive.
Expensive how? Aren't we talking about digital contracts here?
True, but every operation on the blockchain requires gas, a fee, paid in cryptocurrency. Inefficient code uses more gas, like a gas guzzler burns through your fuel.
So you're saying we need to make sure that the engine of the smart contract is fuel efficient. I like that.
Exactly. Users and developers, they want smart contracts that are optimized for gas efficiency, just like you wouldn't want to be stuck with a gas guzzler, right?
For sure. Okay, so we've got these code-heavy contracts, but you also mentioned that there are other models out there. What are those like? I'm curious.
Well, that's where things get even more interesting, right?
Yeah.
As the technology evolves, we're seeing more of these hybrid models. They combine elements of traditional contracts, like legal language, with more advanced tech, like natural language processing, even machine learning.
Wow, okay. So it's not just a black and white code or no code kind of thing.
Exactly. It's a spectrum of approaches.
That's really interesting.
And that's what makes smart contracts so fascinating, honestly. We're not just replicating old systems in a digital format. We're creating entirely new ways of reaching agreements, managing assets in this new digital age.
Okay, that's pretty cool. I like it.
Right.
But I feel like we've been talking a lot about what smart contracts are. How about we talk about how they actually work in the real world?
Great question. That's where we get into the nitty-gritty of how these contracts are designed. You know the structure. And actually, our source material highlights a super useful framework for this. It's called Deloitte's 6-point anatomy of a smart contract.
6 points. Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me. Hit me with these 6 points. 6 points, you say? Let's break it down. Deloitte's 6-point anatomy of a smart contract. Hit me with it.
All right, starting with the agreement.
Yeah.
Basically sets the scene, what's the contract trying to achieve, who's involved, the basics.
Okay, so the who and the what of the contract. What's next?
Then we get specific. We've got the parties. This is where each participant is identified, usually through their unique blockchain address.
Ah, so everyone has their own digital fingerprint. No hiding in the blockchain world, right?
Nope, everything's out in the open. And it's not enough to just know who the players are. We need to know what they're actually doing.
Right. Which brings us to
obligations. This is where it gets interesting. The nitty-gritty of the contract, laying out what each party is supposed to do.
And these obligations, they're usually conditional, right?
Exactly. Think, if this happens, then that happens. Like, if I send you 10 tokens, then you send me whatever it is you're agreeing on.
Right, I gotcha. So it's all about these triggers and actions. But actions need a sequence, right? A flow to them.
Totally. And that, my friend, is where execution comes in. This is how the contract actually plays out step by step.
Like a well-oiled machine. Each part knows its role and when to do its thing.
Exactly. But even the most well-oiled machines can break down, right?
Oh, yeah. What happens then? Do we just hit the reset button?
That's where enforcement comes in. This is the contract's safety net, you could say. It covers what happens if something goes wrong, like if there's a disagreement or someone backs out of the deal or, some unexpected event throws a wrench in the whole thing.
So even in this automated world of smart contracts, we still have checks and balances. That's reassuring.
Right. Always got to have a backup plan. But how do we keep track of everything that's going on?
Yeah, that's a lot to keep track of.
Well, that's our last point. Performance. This is like the contract's record keeper. It tracks everything that happens, from obligations met to payments made, the whole 9 yards.
Okay, so let me see if I've got this straight. We've got the agreement, that's the big picture, then parties, who's involved, obligations, what they're supposed to do, execution, how it all goes down, enforcement, what happens if things go sideways, and performance, keeping track of it all.
You nailed it. That's Deloitte's 6-point anatomy of a smart contract.
Pretty solid framework, right?
Definitely. It's a great way to make sense of what can seem like, well, a whole lot of code.
Speaking of code, even with a solid framework, things can still go wrong if the code itself is faulty.
Right. I mean, we talked about that $30 million Parity wallet hack earlier. That's a pretty stark reminder that even a small mistake can have huge consequences. Absolutely. And it's something that, as we rely more and more on smart contracts, especially in areas like finance, supply chains, healthcare, you name it, the need for robust security measures is only going to become more important.
Totally. And it's not just about preventing financial losses, right? It's about building trust in these systems as a whole, which I think leads to a pretty important question. as smart contracts become more integrated into our lives, how do we find that right balance between automation and human oversight?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's not one with an easy answer, but I think that by understanding the ins and outs of smart contract design, the importance of security, and the evolving nature of this technology as a whole, we can at least start to navigate this new frontier responsibly.
Well said. And I think that's a pretty good place to wrap things up. This has been quite a deep dive. I feel like I learned a lot.
Me too.
And I'm definitely feeling more equipped to navigate the world of smart contracts now.
And as these technologies continue to evolve, who knows what exciting possibilities are on the horizon. Until next time, keep those brains engaged and stay curious.